Take two with the opt-in. Oh, look at that. Cue the opt-in music by Philly's own Il Dutes.
We're produced by Miss Rachel Ishikawa.
Yes, who's wonderful. We're helped out on social media by Ashley Bernard here. And if you don't already, make sure you know the person next to you or behind you, but I see a lot of you already know each other. So, whenever Kath fades this off, we're just going to take a quick minute. So if everyone could just close your eyes, feel your feet on the ground, feel your seat in your chair, and just take 3 of the deepest breaths you've taken yet today. And as you do that, just be aware of any judgments that come up and just let them go. Maybe you want to give thanks. Maybe you want to send compassion. Maybe you just want to be. And when you're done taking the 3 deepest breaths you've taken yet today, you're just going to wait and open your eyes when you don't hear the sound of the bell anymore. Isn't that better? Take it away, friend.
So, as Kelly and I shared, we're the opt-in, and I'm Aurora. I'm an Afro-Latina. The picture behind me is of me and my parents. I was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, to a beautiful, diverse couple, Hugh Archer, who is an African-American, self-proclaimed cowboy from Cuero, Texas, who spent most of his life as a domestic and as a factory worker. My mom, Patricia, is from Monterrey, Mexico, and she too spent most of her life, working life, as a domestic, as a housekeeper, or a word that I actually didn't quite ever like growing up, a maid. And they basically are the the typical immigrant, marginalized couple who literally sacrificed everything so that my sister and I could have a better and different life. And that sacrifice was never lost on me, because what I didn't have in possessions, I actually was given in abundance as it related to principles, as it related to values, and as it certainly related to love. And I used that love to, in essence, propel myself through a collegiate degree at Syracuse University. And what now is almost astonishing to me, a 25-year career working in corporate America, traversing the halls of every boardroom and every hallway in 4 industries, in predominantly Fortune 100 companies. And while that career was very long, it was very hard, it also left me depleted. It left me as a recovering workaholic. But it also gave me the success that allowed me to take care of my parents, It allowed me the success to take care of my family, and it allowed me the success to take care of my community. But something was still really, really missing. Because despite all of the accolades, despite all of the successes, despite all of the awards, I still couldn't break the glass ceiling. And so I decided to make my own table and take my passion to build one company called the Bellatrix Group, which is a marketing consulting firm focused on solving problems at the intersection of health, people, and technology. And then second, the company that Kelly and I founded, Abundance Productions, to do exactly this, to engage in a conversation that allows us to bring our real and true selves into a conversation that sometimes is messy, sometimes is painful, and conversations that are also forgiving. Because inevitably, I say the wrong thing, or she says the wrong thing, but we hope to create space together and for each other.
We grew up very differently, which we didn't know for a while. But I grew up...
I was posing as a mainliner.
Yeah, and so I guess back in the day when I was growing up with a very entrepreneurial father, his name's Pat Croce, and he had a pivotal moment in Philadelphia of making the 76ers go from worst to first, and it was this super fun ride that really showed how connected and alive and special we could all feel together in the city, which I really kind of miss sometimes, and I really appreciate it more now than ever. And he created a phenomenal life for me. I was privileged enough to stay home with my family and raise my kids and be a stay-at-home mom, or choosing to work in entrepreneurial businesses where and when I wanted to. I spent time in Key West for 6 years, and I loved moving back to the groundedness and brotherly love and sisterly affection of Philadelphia. So as my kids got older and I was allowed more time to work on myself, that kind of gave me time to ponder questions like, who am I, and what am I here to do, and what's my passion? Which, as a white woman, I thought was yoga retreats and gin and tonics. And that was my idea of self-care. And so when Aurora stepped out of corporate America and we were able to spend much more time together, she even joined on some of said yoga retreats. She didn't join as much on the gin and tonic side. I drank enough of those for both of us.
Not that there's anything wrong with gin and tonics.
And we just spent more and more time enjoying each other's company, having deep conversations. And it wasn't that we were afraid to talk about race.
Not at all. We actually talked about it quite a bit. And we went deeper into talking about it after we went through a pretty significant election cycle. I think everybody probably in the audience remembers it. That gave us a lot of content to talk about and discuss and sort of really unpack, so what the hell happened? Who voted for who? Why? Making hypotheses of why they voted for who they voted. Who showed up to vote? Who didn't show up to vote? And what did it all mean? And then simultaneously, around that same period, there was this amazing book that came out, written by an author, Robin DiAngelo, and it's called White Fragility. And I bought 30 copies of the book. It's that amazing. And it was amazing because it's a book that truly stopped me in my tracks. And as I turned every page of this book, I was brought to tears. Because in this small book of less than 200 pages, Robin DiAngelo breaks down in a very clear and succinct manner everything that I had been feeling as a person of color. And everything I thought I had been talking to all of my friends about. And all of the things I thought I had appropriately packaged into conversations within my corporate work environment. But that somehow was getting lost and not heard and not embraced. Because I'm tenacious and I don't give up quite easily, I bought 30 copies of the book. And with much love and with much appreciation, I handed the book to some of my best white and male friends. And I actually had the courage to also hand it out to some of my white former colleagues and bosses.
I was one of those honored recipients of said book. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can't believe it's so nice that you're sharing this with me. And I remember being aghast after the election with my other white girlfriends. And then when I read White Fragility, I realized you've been aghast for a very long time. And I also realized that when we were having our conversations about race, I thought that we were talking about that white woman over there and over there, but really we were also talking about this white woman right here. And so it shifted the connection and the depth of our conversations.
Very much so.
And not that that was your job. I was clear with that in the beginning, like this is my job, and this is an inside job, and I'm sorry, and thank you. And you can speak to it, but due to your level of healing, you were able to hold space for my projected learning curve.
Yeah, and there was a naiveness that I had, because despite the fact that I saw very few people that looked like me in the place that I spent most of my time, which was in my work in corporate America life, I assumed everyone had a person of color as a best friend. Shit, I had a ton of white best friends. And I just naively assumed that white women had best friends or intimate relationships with people of color.
And mind you, we live in suburban Philadelphia. We live in the mainline area. And I was like, I hate to tell you this, but I don't think there's a lot of white women with a bestie of color. She was like, really? I was like, we can punt this to our social media friends and just see, anecdotal evidence of any. So it was like, no, yes, I do, or not yet. Well, it was 100% not yet. So then we're like, oh, okay. Since this
Shocking.
This is...
For me, not for her.
Yeah.
Because again, it was this realization, this is the reality that we live in.
And you always knew we lived in two different worlds, but I was just coming to the realization that we lived in two different worlds. So those worlds, we're going to kind of tell just 3 stories. We as humans, we love to tell stories to ourselves, and our 3 stories are told very differently. It seems like a very general story, like freedom, and that we all should understand and experience that story the same way.
And so for clarification, or for just emphasis, freedom is the power to act, to speak, and to think without external imposed restraints or constraints. So
freedom, and after reading White Fragility and catching up on some apparently long overdue homework that I had not done of relearning history, I was like, 1776. I thought this was like Yankee Doodle Dandy, and we were the land of the free and the home of the brave, and, you know, we were just whistling while we were signing the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, while we were driving down 76, watching the 76ers. And then after I did the work, I was like, so really though, if the country was started by white male slave owners, and then they made all the rules for white male slave owners, and then we're still following all those same rules, then nothing was really started free. So we're in this matrix of racism that started this way. So then everything's racist, and that therefore I am racist. And that was just one of a lot of big, fat, uncomfortable realizations for me.
And one of the questions that Kelly asked me one day
Yeah.
is,
I was like, so you guys don't celebrate 4th of July?
no.
And I was like, oh my God, we've been like decorating bikes and bunting and red, white, and blue crepe paper and all this shit for like 30 years. I'm like so cringy. And like, what the fuck was I celebrating?
That's a great question. And my response to Kelly was, as a person of color, as a BIPOC person, as a person that is different, and as a kid who grew up in the South, in Texas, with a black father, I saw on a number of occasions throughout my childhood my father being stopped by the police, harassed for no apparent reason other than the fact that he was black. And on one occasion, seeing my father dragged out of the car and beaten within inches of his life. As a black child growing up in San Antonio, Texas, I saw a mother wake up every morning with bags under her eyes because she would not go to sleep until she saw my father walk into our door and know that he was safe after having worked the second or third shift at the factory. As a woman of color, I turn the news on every day and I see the story play out every single evening in our news cycle. And so when people ask me about freedom, when Kelly asked me about freedom, I have never seen that freedom reflected. When I think about Eric, when I think about Trayvon, when I think about Sandra, I think about Catrice and countless numbers of black and brown bodies that supposedly live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Freedom. And so that is a story and a different world that we've lived in. But it's not the only difference in our worlds, because there's a difference in the way that we value brown and black bodies, in the way that we define beauty across the spectrum. And Tressie has a beautiful definition. Beauty. They say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that ugly is as ugly does, both of which are lies. Ugly is everything done to you in the name of beauty. knowing the difference is part of being free.
So, yeah, this goes from super deep to super shallow. This was my ideal of beauty. Gwyneth was everything. I'd be like, oh, Aurora, you got to get this cookbook that she came out with, and she's doing this meditation, and now we got to get these yoni stones, and we're going to shove them up our crotch and hold them in all day, and then we got to do her yoga class, and then her dance class. Don't forget her, and she's like dancing. Like, what the fuck are they doing? Anyway, there was so much to check off the list that I could keep myself busy for like 10 more generations of...
Okay, and can I just add the cookbooks?
I said cookbooks.
I know.
I have all
but
three.
I know.
One signed.
And so we would make these recipes, and I'd be like, where's the flavor? Where's the flavor? Gotta put some hot sauce on this.
But I was too busy checking all the boxes. Where's my checks? Where's my checks? I was checking all the boxes. I was getting my abs. I was in the zone. I was in the Pilatesing. I was, and it seemed shallow, yet I realize now how deep it was, because it's a white-centered European ideal of beauty that I'm aspiring to. And in that excludes her. And here I am dragging her violently into this system that I can't win, and she was not even set up to play in.
And I said, beauty is not defined by blackness or by brownness. And I know that when I say that, I have a lot of friends that say, oh, but it's changing. And yes, it is.
But it's capital. It's capital. And it's violent to the people that it's attracting to it, and even more so to the people that it excludes.
Correct. And I would also offer is that when we look at the percentage of images that perpetuate our visual living in this world, that the dominant articulation of beauty continues to be white-centered. And so you end up chasing it, and I end up being asked to be it, which I will never be. So that leads us into another beautiful story and conversation that we have around authenticity.
Which is a shame that I'm the one starting this conversation, because I guess we only have to go up from here. I mean, when you actually have books on your bookshelf titled Authenticity, it's like, that should be a sign right there. That my version of an authenticity story is quite the opposite, because I felt like my whole life I did shoulds. You should act like this, you should do this, you should be this. And I would even run into people that I would be almost envious of their authenticity, because they would come into a room and I would be like, how can they be so deep and engaging? Like, I wish I could be like that. And I almost had shame around being boring. And the boringness was that I never had to delve any deeper than where I was. I was allowed to be superficial. I was allowed to have two emotions, happy or angry. And if it didn't fit in those categories, I think I just denied them. There was a time where I had a coach and she gave me a list of like 150 emotions and feelings. And I was like, oh, I guess I've like felt some of these before. I just never had the words for them. I never went towards them and found out why I was feeling like that. Maybe that would have given me some authenticity. I don't know. But I just remember understanding that I was in denial of a lot of things. And I was allowed to operate in a very superficial, non-introspective way.
And it's, in essence, the norm.
Yeah, and mind you, I think the shame around my boringness, I drank a lot of alcohol to make sure that situations and myself were not boring. which doesn't work. I don't recommend that, but therapy does. So any sort of therapeutic modalities do. But I do realize that as you've taught me so much about authenticity, but we were both trapped.
We were, because as Kelly defines what authenticity meant to her, it was actually being defined of what authenticity meant for me. And so I spent, again, a significant part of my life trying to contort to the definitions of what was defined as beauty, to the definition of what was defined as leadership stance or leadership presence. And so I desperately, for a significant 20 years, pressed my hair, talked without using my hands, and toned down the expression of who I am so that I could make the people in the room, in the boardroom, the white people in the boardroom, comfortable. Because when I showed up expressing myself and my enthusiasm and my passion, and God forbid that I actually ever show up with my natural hair, I was deemed unprofessional. I was deemed emotional. I was deemed irrational. And so what I shared with Kelly is that when you wake up every day and you are pushed against that current, you lose yourself. And you lose all notion of who am I? And you end up looking like the picture of my corporate picture to your right. And so what happens is therapy and an incredible opportunity to go deep. And so I offer, why do people of color have a much greater clarity of who they are? Because we have to. Because everything around you is telling you that you're different. And oh, by the way, not only that you're different, but that it's not comfortable and that it's not enough because it doesn't fit the norm. And so in order to first survive, then secondly, strive, and then hopefully get to the place of clear alignment of self, you've got to go in and you've got to do the work. And to become very comfortable with who you are, to stand in the storm that literally happens daily, hourly, minute by minute, second by second. And what we also sorted in our conversations is that we were both trapped. Mm-hmm. I was trapped in being told that the norm was you.
I was trapped in the norm being white and boring, obviously.
And Gwyneth.
Yeah, and very Gwyneth, very goopy. There's nothing wrong with Gwyneth Paltrow, just my own interpretation. And yeah, I mean, I had to learn how to then, well, first understand that that norm and that whiteness existed in my life, and then understand how to challenge it, and how ultimately that's really looking in the mirror and journeying inward, only to ultimately show up actually authentically.
Yes. And so
yeah, these are just 3 stories. We could go on and on and on. And we do in a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And our next one coming up actually is Robin DiAngelo that we interview about white fragility. Comes out on Tuesday. And all these stories are all a part of our collective conditioning for all of us. We're conditioned by these stories every day and throughout our whole lives. But I think the beauty of stories is that they can be edited.
Yes.
And I think in editing isn't perfect. And I mean, as a white person, I think perfectionism is one of my strong traumatic traits that hides all my shame, is trying to be perfect. So I think for these stories, we all need to kind of go to Perfectionist Anonymous, which I was thinking could be a really good thing. That's another idea we could talk about. But anyway.
And our perfectionist stems from different things.
Yes. Both
Yes.
stemming from shame, but trauma of some sort.
Yeah, and so shame and survival, right?
Yeah. So when we let go of this perfectionism, we deal with it in therapy, we can go about editing these stories and having really imperfect conversations.
And those imperfect conversations, we hope, create a window that all of us have, a window to tap into the
Vulnerability.
incredible.
I was going to say vulnerability.
To I think emotions that really fundamentally connect us, which is having the courage to have the conversation, which is what we encourage everyone to do. Standing with an open heart and curiosity, being open to acceptance, being open to forgiving. Because, as I say to Kelly, you're going to mess it up.
Oh, yes. Very much so.
And fundamentally, allowing yourself to be open to love. For yourself and for everyone around you.
And I think both of you and I think that that is true freedom, true beauty, and true authenticity.
Absolutely. Because when we don't step into the magnificence of that, we find ourselves.
Yeah, because what we are unconscious to silently governs us. We have a teacher, Caverly Morgan, who says that. We have another teacher that says awareness is the medicine. However you want to slice it. What we are unconscious to silently governs us.
And so we ask through our conversations, through the honesty and vulnerability of our conversations, is for everyone to sort of opt in to peeling back a little bit of that veil of unconsciousness and a step towards awareness.
And one way we do that, I swear this tool works for so many things, is by taking 3 of the deepest breaths that we've taken today. So close your eyes. And take 3 of the deepest breaths you've taken today. Whether you're coming from a place of acceptance, whether you're coming from a place of curiosity, of love, of forgiveness.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
We are so grateful to have been here today. Thank you. Please make sure you find us at your favorite podcast app. We're on a dozen of them. If there's one we missed, let us know. We're at the Opt-In. Our show comes out every Tuesday. We're in season 1 right now.
And don't forget to follow us on the socials and join us on this journey. And we'd love for you to tell us what you're opting into, because it begins with a conversation. So thank you all very much, and have a brilliant day.
We love you. Thank you.
Thank you.